schools should be trying to engender and develop. It was the acceptance of otherness that appealed to me. As an English teacher, I've always been convinced of the value of language in developing thought. But in addition, I liked the emphasis on process rather than product. I also saw an opportunity to develop what had been happening in primary schools around the authority, and it seemed a great pity not to develop that in the secondary environment. So it seemed to me to be an opportunity to develop good practice and to make use of the very developed skills that pupils were coming into secondary school with, but in a different environment, to see if we could develop them ourselves beyond primary. And I then thought that it was something that could unify the school, no less. It's something that could engender an enthusiasm again for the whole business of learning in a shared environment, something that could make different people from different faculties in the secondary school see indeed what they entered teaching for in the first place.
So, I mean, it's now well embedded within the English faculty.
It is indeed,
Do you see in the fullness of time, is it the school's vision that it will roll out to?
That's the plan.
All?
Although there are obviously some difficulties in the secondary situation that are unique to the secondary school, with its different times, the period bells, etc., that interrupt the normal, natural time that you would normally have for an inquiry, and also the very fact of classrooms being different from in a primary environment, etc. But these are not insurmountable problems. We found them, in fact, quite challenging, but possible to develop and to make our own identity for philosophy for kids in the secondary environment. We wouldn't want to be seen to be doing it in the same way, but so we're working with our particular situation. And yes, the plan is to address it in the different faculties, to have some champions within the school in the different faculties, and to develop it as a whole school policy ultimately. But we're going slowly, steadily with the English department and other individuals who are concerned to find out more about it and to develop it for their own particular subject areas and disciplines. Secondary teachers are, I suppose, challenged by the idea of the attack, if you like, on their subjects. They're inclined to think that there's a product that has to be developed and has to come at the end of a programme of work or whatever. But philosophy for children is, I think for many, many teachers, the way to approach it is as a methodology. And it does help them elicit exactly what they're looking for in their own subject, so they're not compromised in the sense of the content having been compromised in any way. The methodology, quite the reverse actually, is true. Pupils are learning from each other in the very best traditional fashion. They're learning from each other and they're listening and they're developing idea as they speak. I think any subject teacher, regardless of the discipline, is interested in developing a curiosity about their subject. And to me, that is the biggest selling point, if you like, about philosophy for children. It introduces again the curiosity element, regardless of whether the subject is English or science or home economics, whatever. It allows an opportunity to pursue learning for its own sake, regardless of just having to have a product at the end of it, which is accessible and in front of you. And I think in that respect, it does touch, as you rightly say, on the whole business that we have to address in the future of curriculum for excellence. It touches on all four of the competencies, and we all have to address that, regardless of our faculties, regardless of our particular expertise. So I think it does allow us to approach that in a way that might help us feel secure about the future curriculum developments in Scottish education.
I wanted to talk to you about your experience of being in those philosophy lessons. Obviously, for all of you, you're with our school for quite a short period of time for this year, but all of you, I mean, you're from Norway, Quebec, Denmark, Mexico and Venezuela. What's going on for you in these lessons when you're engaged in the dialogue?
I think it's nice because I've never done any philosophy in my life, and I usually hate philosophy, but I'm starting to like it, to like to think about it and everything, all that we're talking about. I think it's nice. I'm starting to like it.
Okay, that's nice, Emily. Camilla, what's it like? I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is, you know, obviously this class we've had in today, that, you know, these are smart kids, and you are, or too, but you're having to do a much, much harder thing, which is to process language. How difficult do you find that, Camilla?
In the first place, I thought it was really difficult because it's the first time I do philosophy, and I was like, phew, I have to think a lot here. But now it's like, I like it too. It's makes you think in a different way. You really have to concentrate all the time, because we have to understand what all these other students are saying, but we also have to think about our opinion about the question.
I mean, are you still at the point where you're translating?
No, not anymore.
And what about before you're actually speaking? Are you having to process in your home language then produce, or are you reaching a point where you're processing in English?
When I came, I had to, get it in English and translate in Danish, but now it's just in English all the time.
That's fantastic.
So that's much easier.
For you as well, Liz?
At first, when we did it the first time, it was really hard, and I remember I didn't say anything. I was so afraid that I was just sitting there. But now, because, you have to think in a whole different way. You have to think, kind of, it's not, deep, but,
it's challenging.
Yeah, it's challenging to think about.
I mean, because what we were talking about is this idea about whether or not you're still processing in English, and you were saying when we started the philosophy, it was extremely difficult.
Hard. I've never done anything like this before. I don't think it's a very big thing in Norway yet, because I haven't heard of any schools or anything that does this. But when I came here, it was really hard, because you have to understand what everyone else is saying, and they're talking fast and they're talking in dialect, there are different slang words. But now, when I don't have to process this through, translate it to Norwegian, now it just comes naturally out as English. It's so much easier, and then you can you can really get a lot out of it. You start to think in a different way, I think. So it's good.
I mean, I'm just wondering if you've had a period of feeling quite unsafe, actually, a kind of transition period of stopping thinking in Norwegian, from 16, 17 years of processing that way.
It's really hard. But now I'm mostly thinking English, but it's just sometimes I think, something I think Norwegian, but mostly I think in English now, because I'm surrounded by English, it just comes naturally.
And so even when you're not in school, you're beginning to think in English. That's amazing.
It's just when I'm alone or something. I maybe sometimes think in Norwegian. If I've talked to someone at home or something like that, I usually think in Norwegian after, and then I get confused.
That's really interesting. Andrea, can I just bring in, because you're from Mexico, and I'd heard before that there is a program of teaching philosophy for children in Mexico. Had you had an experience of this before?
Yeah, we have philosophy. Since we start school, it's probably 1 hour per week or something like that. And when you enter to high school, it was last year, it's like the subject. So,
right.
So we had to have.
So, but are you saying from small children?
Yeah.
You have philosophy.
Yeah.
Was your experience of doing philosophy here any different than in Mexico?
Well, it's different, because first it's hard to translate everything and just processing information to your own language, and it was hard at first, and the opinions are not quite the same.
You're noticing cultural differences?
Yeah, it's called, yeah.
Like the kind of major differences that you've noticed between,
and
Mexican values, Mexican beliefs than Scottish?
There's some, and also because, for example, in our classes, they first tell us a philosopher and history or something like that, and then we have to what we think about him and what his ideas compared to the society right now, stuff like that. So
is that just in high school, or is?
Well, we start the subject in high school, but small kids in primary, they have this talking.
Like an inquiry-based thing, but in Mexico, when you study philosophy as a discrete academic subject,
Yeah.
is it still inquiry-based? That you have thinking time
Yeah.
and dialogue?
Yeah, we have to, but we have also to count others' opinions from philosophers of other countries and stuff like that.
Okay, that's really interesting.
I was asked to take responsibility for the evaluation of the Thinking Through Philosophy programme, for devising that evaluation and for implementing it, which was seen as important in view of the investment of time and energy of our teachers. We used three main methods to evaluate what was happening. Firstly, we used standardised tests, reliable and valid measures to get some idea of whether there was any difference between how the children were before they started their participation in thinking through philosophy and how they were after they'd been taking part regularly for a period of time in that practice. Secondly, we used video recordings to get some idea of whether the nature of the classroom discussion had changed at all following weekly participation in philosophical inquiry. And thirdly, we used questionnaires to elicit some feedback from head teachers, class teachers, and particularly from the children themselves to get some idea of how they saw their particular experiences. So, what were the findings? What did we learn? Firstly, through the standardised tests, we use one particular test known as the cognitive ability tests. Now, this test is a measure of verbal, non-verbal and mathematical reasoning in children, and in the period of 18 months that the children were participating regularly in philosophical inquiry, we found a significant change in the reasoning abilities of the children. A gain of 6 points across the entire population was found on average, which is quite a significant gain and has implications for the level of independent thinking in the children, which is important in both their personal lives and also later on in their work lives, but also has an implication for their learning outcomes, and there's a direct link between how they perform in this test and their predicted success in external examinations when they're older. So that was the first measure that was used. The other standardised tests that we used was a measure of self-esteem in learning situations. And again, we found a significant change in those children that had been doing the philosophical inquiry, in that they rated themselves as more confident. Their esteem in learning situations did appear to have improved. I mentioned the use of video recording, and what we did here was to video record a number of lessons in different classes which were discussion based, and then we repeated that exercise following the regular experience of philosophical inquiry, and we analysed in some detail those recordings, looking as to whether there'd been any changes, and we found a number of changes. Firstly, we found changes in the frequency of times that the children supported their views with reasons. There was in fact, the rate doubled following their regular participation in inquiry. They also were talking more during lessons. It wasn't a question that the teacher was doing all the talking. The balance between teacher talk and pupil talk changed dramatically. The pupils were not only more confident in giving their views, but were also providing more elaborate responses, more sophisticated responses when they did share their views. We also found a change in teacher behaviour, in that the teachers were offering more open-ended, more follow-up questions, and presumably that was the reason for the change in the children's behaviour. The questionnaires were interesting and were analysed in some detail. And what was interesting was the fact that the perceptions of the children were the same as the perceptions of the teachers, which was the same as the perceptions of the head teachers. The children found themselves feeling more confident as the sessions proceeded. They realised the non-threatening nature of the process. They were more willing to communicate their views and to participate. They were more ready to listen to the views of others. And again, this finding of increased engagement and participation, which was interesting. And so there were a number of different approaches, all of which seemed to agree and added to the robust nature of the findings. Basically, we found changes in not only the cognitive intelligence, but also in the social-emotional intelligence of the children, and these relate to the way that children learn. There was one other important finding, and quite an unusual finding, in that we tracked the children right through into secondary education. The children had been considered first at the start of their primary six, when they were approximately 10 years of age. They had been followed up initially towards the end of primary seven, when they were approaching roughly 12 years of age, and were followed up when they were approaching roughly 14 years of age. Individual children were tracked down to their secondary schools and again completed the cognitive abilities tests. Now, despite the fact that they hadn't actually been participating in further inquiry, all their gains had been sustained over the 2-year period in their secondary education, which is a very interesting and encouraging result, because one of the concerns about thinking skills is the question, well, to what extent do they endure? What extent are they sustainable? So, in many ways, the future of Scottish education is encapsulated in a curriculum for excellence, which is about the aspiration that all children will become successful learners, effective communicators, responsible citizens, and confident individuals. Now, the sort of gains that we found in the evaluation of the Clackmannanshire programme would suggest that those very skills and abilities are very much supported by the process of philosophy for children in classrooms. And our finding would certainly be that there were some very significant gains, some slightly surprising gains through the process of inquiry, and that philosophical inquiry is, in the longer term, an excellent investment of time and energy of teachers, and very much consistent with the modern curriculum and the modern needs of children and young people.
Actually, quite quickly we noticed changes in the children. Some of them being their ability to reason, to be clearer in their own understanding, basically, of probably their own understanding about their own emotions and their own feelings. They were certainly able to articulate these better. We noticed, as they were able to articulate those feelings and communicate to others how they felt, with that there came a growing ability to reason and an increased ability to just to become, I think, more perceptive. That in turn, I believe, helped enhance self-esteem. So we did see those aspects developing quite quickly after the programme had been running for a relatively short period of time. it's embedded into the curriculum now, and the children are more comfortable, familiar with the philosophy programme. They are starting to think at a deeper level. They are certainly far more aware. They have a greater empathy with each other. And I do see it becoming more a natural part of the school and the curriculum. It's helped change the behaviour in the playground. We have fewer physical disputes where children are fighting. They will more rapidly go to an adult and with another child and say, I've got a problem here, or they will discuss a problem with one another or with the teacher. But they won't just, they're not so ready to lash out at one another. So we have seen that reasoning coming in. I also, working with the children, have noticed that when we are bargaining or they want something, they will use logic and reason on me as well. And I find I have got to think quite carefully about why I'm coming to a decision. So they're using it not just amongst themselves, but in a wider context too. And very effectively, I've got to say.